Everyone hear me? Okay. Well, clock says 2, so we'll get started. Is introduction to GPG. A little bit about me is I've been doing tech for most of my adult life. I first saw something with the PGP, which in like the late 90s, didn't understand it, just looked like a bunch of text on the screen. And it was until later that I got interested, and this presentation was basically a reflection of the things I had to come to understand to be able to use GPG. So, just before we get into any material, how many of you have actually used PGP, GPG already? Okay, so a good amount, good. I don't claim to be an expert, but I do believe that the important parts in understanding how to use GPG, I think we've got it here. If you got an expert, Aaron Hopkins is there. Yeah, sorry. So, okay. So, the first question, right? Why? Probably back off a little bit in the history on this is it's like early 90s, and Phil Zimmerman, who wrote PGP, and there's 3 terms, I should explain them. There's PGP, pretty good privacy, there's open PGP, and then there's GPG. Basically, PGP is the first implementation. It's a crypto system to allow you to do messaging. There's open PGP, which is the standard. It's not an implementation, it's just the RFC. And then GPG, which is a free software implementation of PGP. So why would we use it? What are we hoping, what will it give us? What will it do that we value? So there's basically 3 things at the core of it. First is confidentiality. Confidentiality is basically you want to be able to control who can your information. It's not that you're just going to keep it to yourself, you're going to share it, but you want to be able to have some control over who has access to the information. This is kind of the obvious one. This is one that probably everyone already knew. So, confidentiality. Next one is integrity. So a message came. What confidence do you have that hasn't been modified, changed? Because someone's sending you a message and it's somewhat sensitive, you want to have some confidence that it's not been modified on you. If you're, say for example, we'll go back to 2013 with the Snowden, revelations and everything like that. They used GPD for a lot of their communication, and one concern probably was making sure someone's not manipulating your message, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. The last major thing that you get from GPG is the ability to know that it came from the person you expected it to come from, that it's not someone else. That's manipulating, that you're talking to a person you expect to be communicating with. So confidentiality, integrity, and then authenticity. That's what GPG gives you. That's what the benefit of GPG. Now, it's not perfect, in the sense that if your endpoint is compromised, if your computer, there's keylogger, malware, because once it's unencrypted and on your machine, GPG no longer protects you. So, you have to be mindful what it can do for you and that what it won't protect you from. Fair enough. And by the way, if you have questions, we're about to get into some detailed things. Please ask. I don't want to get deeper where I've assumed that you understand, and then we talk about something that builds on it. So please raise your hand if you have questions. So how do you get it on your system? I know some people could install it from source. I'm a little lazy, don't want to deal with that. Most of the time I use package management. So if I'm on Linux, Debian, it's pretty much installed by default. How many of you run Linux as your desktop OS? Okay, so if you, chances are you won't have to install it because it's installed. Probably the most realistic option for most people would be some type of normal download. How many of you run Mac? A lot of people. So GPG tools. How many of you are on Windows? Probably the rest, right? If you're on that, then there's GPG for Win. There are tools. It doesn't matter what platform you're on. You can use GPG. In fact, we just talked about some of that. There is a command line instructions, and actually I included with the presentation materials a kind of walkthrough, a practical exercise of going through GPG, the different specific tasks you'll need to be able to do to use it. So if you have the presentation materials downloaded, it'll be in there. I hope to talk about it a little bit here. But don't feel that you have to go command line. If you're not comfortable in the command line, I don't want to stop you from being able to use GPG. If you use the GUI, let's go. Maybe later on you'll figure out to get comfortable with the command line, but certainly there are tools for that. So the first step in getting to use GPG is generating your keys. You're going to generate, is by default, a signing key and an encryption key. The system you can pretty much go with the default options of the system. If you care, you might make your key a little bit stronger, but the defaults I'd call them good. So the thing about GPG and encryption, and this is the Kirchhoff's principle, I hope I didn't mispronounce that, but basically it boils down to, if your adversary knows everything but your key, and a good system would still be secure. So that's when we're talking about generating keys, there are things in GPG, mistakes you can make. Probably the one mistake you should not, cannot afford to make is lose control of your private key. Other stuff might be inconvenient, but you're basically compromised at that point. So, generating your keys. By the default now is RSA. It used to be DSA. RSA is the default if you go in this system. I think 2048-bit will be the size. The next gen version of GPG will actually have an option for elliptic curves. It's not there yet, but if you can actually download and play with it, but the next gen you'll have that option. But RSA really is what it is today. I just talked about this a little bit. 2048 RSA is the default, and that's good enough. If you're extra paranoid, you can go bigger than that, but yeah. This is maybe the one thing that you'll kind of have to be conscious of in generating your keys is getting your passphrase. Your passphrase protects your private key. So instead of password, passphrase. A lot longer, some length, because this really is the thing that protects your key. And so, taking time, I know, human nature is, we want it easy to type, we want it easy to remember, but, those very things are not good security things. So, get a good passphrase. Sharing keys. So we get to our generate keys, so we're good, we have something. But the thing is, in order to use this with other people, we'll generate a private key, which we keep, that's just ours. We never share it. There's no good reason to ever share your private key. If someone asks for that, then you know it's not good. Your public key you can give to anybody. But the thing about it is, in order to share with other people, to be able to communicate with other people, you have to be able to get your key, accessible to others. There's a very rudimentary, low-level approach, which is you export your public key, give it to whoever you want to communicate with, and they import it. It works. It will work. The only problem is it really doesn't scale well, right? If you want to interact with more people and share things around, that's going to really limit your world. So in practical terms, we use key servers. What a key server is basically a machine that sits up there, and you upload your key to the key server. Then other people can actually find your key and pull it down. Now, you're going to notice I drew key servers, right? And I have a few machines there. Normal default behavior for a key server is that they synchronize with each other. So if you upload your public key to the MIT PGP key server, it's going to be on the GNU or Free Software Foundation's going to sync with it. So even though you upload only to one server, they're synchronizing with each other. One kind of thing, and I'll explain, I have a practical exercise and I'll help with this, but once you upload your key to the key server, there's no way to take that down. Once it's up there forever. You can revoke your key, but the fact is, it's going to be there. You can never say, oh, I want to get rid of that. So that's kind of, something that when you're learning, you might make mistakes. You're just picking up on things, and that's something you need to be aware of with key servers. Now, just because you have someone's key, that isn't anything about whether you trust that key, whether you feel confident that that key belongs to the person you believe it belongs to. So the big part in that is if you don't have some mechanism to be able to know that that key is actually that person's key, if you're using GPG and you don't have the way to authenticate, the problem is you could be man in the middle. For example, you think you're talking to the person on the other side of the slide here, but you're actually talking to someone in the middle. And he has the ability to certainly observe, but also possibly manipulate your message back and forth. And basically, without being able to authenticate and know who that other person is, that's a danger you face. So there are some different trust models, some ways to know this. The first one is direct. You know that person, you talk to that person, you got the key from him, he said it's his. Okay, that's a level of confidence. This doesn't scale very well. If you had to physically meet every person before you knew that you could trust the key, there'd be obviously limit what you could do with the service, right? Another model that's kind of common in kind of organizations, businesses, hierarchies, is basically the normal hierarchy, right? Like, say for example, if you use on the web TLS, SSL, pretty much the framework for trust is a hierarchy. You have these root, you have intermediates, and then you have every website at the bottom. So this is a model that could work. And probably if you're using GPG in a corporate environment, they probably would implement something like this, where you have, you know, the IT or your management would actually have different, you know, main root and then your intermediaries, and that's how you would trust it. As long as it's signed by either the root or the intermediaries, you're saying, we trust the authenticity on this. A little less hierarchical and more kind of anarchistic, if I can use that word, is the web of trust. And what it boils down to is, as you meet people, you authenticate them, check their driver's license, have them read off their key, verify, or their fingerprint, and you know it's them. And you would sign there, so you would at least have ability to trust them. And then they sign someone else's. You could use that transitive trust. I authenticate him, he authenticates him, and this allows you to scale. It requires discipline and making sure you're doing it right, but this scales, whereas that doesn't, right? Not really effectively. So usually they run key signing parties at these events, but Aaron, are we planning on doing one this? Okay, yeah. So we might do, not this year, but we'll get one going. So in order to meet up with people and to verify their identity and verify that the key belongs to that person, usually you have key signing parties. And what they boil down to is you get in. Usually some organizations desirable beforehand, you send your fingerprint to someone that's organizing it so they can have it kind of prepared and it flows much smoother. But again, in most cases you're verifying someone's identity with their usually government photo ID, and then they verify their fingerprint. Now I've used fingerprint a few times, and I should explain what fingerprint is. This large blob of text right here is partial ASCII representation of my public key. Not in all of it, but part of it. And if we had to sit and read that one out, no, it's not practical. So basically, your fingerprint is effectively a hash of your public key. And that's unique to your key. A lot of times you'll hear the term key ID, and usually that's just the last 8 characters of your fingerprint. When you do a key signing part, you're going to verify the full fingerprint, but usually in the software you use, they're only going to show you the key ID, in short form. You can show everything, but default is just going to show you the key ID. So if you see those terms and you're using it, that's what you're seeing. Now there is a initiative, I think it's been about a year and a half now, called Keybase IO, and it's kind of GPG, if I could say, for the web, and with kind of a social networking feel to it. I think it's got some GPG in the past. Part of the issue is usability, and in some ways I think they addressed that. But one thing I've seen is in Keybase, what happens is you can track and be tracked. Let me see if I have that web page open. Okay, yeah, here's mine. So, here's my Keybase IO. And I track some people, and I am tracked by a few people. A key point in this, when you track somebody in Keybase IO, the problem is, you think, oh, it's my friend, click, I'll track them. In Keybase IO, when you track somebody, you're basically signing their key, at least within the system. So the key point in that is, unless you verified their fingerprint, their key, you probably should not track somebody. Not just because they're friends, but you're actually vouching to everyone else, I know I verified this person's identity. So you should, some more care than, oh, like someone on Facebook. No, it's not that. So now that you actually, you've generated a key, you've shared keys. Now the next part is actually doing something useful with the keys, right? And we need to explain, some of you may already get this, but for those of you not familiar, there's symmetric key, and then there's public key cryptography. And basically, the key in a symmetric key, you use the same key for both encryption and decryption. In that part, the problem with public or with the symmetric key is that how do you share the secret? The secret that you have to share is symmetric key. And if you're on two sides of the world, you got to be able to share that key. And short of putting it in a briefcase, handcuffing it at someone's hand, and having him go to the other end of the world so he can give the key, you got to be able to share a key. Secret sharing is kind of the big worry with symmetric key, and that's what the problem that public key encryption solves. Basically, what happens is you generate, you have your public and private key. Again, your private, never share it. Your public key, anybody, even your worst enemy, could have your public key. It's meant to be that way. So what happens is now, if someone wants to encrypt something and send it to you, they use your public key. The only person that can read something encrypted by your public key is you. So, it locks but does not unlock in this scenario. And again, that's why you don't share your public key. Besides the encryption part, there's another feature or value you can get out of the public key approach. And basically, when you have a message, say you don't want to be able to control who has the message, but you want to assure other people that your message came from you and it hasn't been manipulated. You may choose to use GPG and never encrypt something, but just use it as a tool that allows other people to know that the message came from you and it hasn't been manipulated. You can use your private key effectively to sign a message, and then everyone else in the world can use your public key to know that came from you. So that's the integrity and authenticity value that you can get out of the system. Now we're on our practical example or exercise. I've included in the presentation material, so if you go and download and pull that in, a series of steps that you can take. They're the command line commands to do this with. The reason why I chose command line is it doesn't matter what platform you're on, you can use these. So I just walk through it. We're not going to stay too long, but the first one is generating your key pair, an obvious one. The second one I'll explain is generating a revocation certificate. While you're not supposed to lose control of your private key, it can happen. Things happen, right? So basically, it's recommended at the time that you generate your private key, your key pair, to go and generate a revocation certificate. And all it is basically saying, something bad happened, I lost control, don't trust this. Now, you do that at the time that you generate it, and you keep that somewhere else, you store it. So in the day or something happens when you lose control, you have the ability to basically send a message. You can send it to the public key servers and say, I've revoked this key, don't trust it. So even, so this is kind of in case you do the one thing you're not supposed to do, which is lose control of your private key, this is your way to mitigate against that. Now, the step 3 is basically sending it to a public key server. You got, in order to share, right, we talked about earlier. Then the next step, it shows how to get the fingerprint, because you're going to be able to, you want to verify the fingerprint of someone else's when you receive that. You can retrieve, here the command for retrieving someone else's public key. Then you would fingerprint to make sure it matches what you're expecting it to be. And then you can sign their public key. When you sign their key, you're saying, I vouch for him. This is part of that web of trust. So you're basically telling the rest of the world, I assert that this is that person's key. Now, just because you're asserting trust for other people, you may have to establish whether you trust this key or not. And that's what step 8 is basically edit the key, say, I'm going to make a trust decision. I want to say, yes, I trust this key. And that's for you. You're not asserting to anyone else. You're just saying, for me, I trust this key. Then you can export. Usually for key signing parties, at the point that you've done the key signing, you go back, you sign their key. The protocol normally is that you send a copy of their key that you signed back to them, so that they can make the decision whether to upload it to the public key server or not. Because maybe they don't want everyone to see who signed their key. So just a protocol, once you've signed someone's key, send that to them, export it, send it to them, and let them decide if they want to upload it to a public key server or not. Just a courtesy. Okay. Then obviously you can import when someone else signs your keys. Now you can compose a message. If you're doing command line, I recommend just in a text file. It just is easier this way. Then what you can do is, this is the command to encrypt and sign your message. So in this case, you're not just encrypting it, but you're actually saying, yeah, I'm signing it with my private key. You know that we have the confidentiality, integrity, and authenticity. The option here that says armor, GPG, the default, will not give you a text readable output. Armor forces output to be in ASCII armor or text readable. So you can cut and paste that into a text message. That's what the option means there. Once you receive, now you've encrypted and signed a message. Now you can receive and decrypt a message. And what it'll do is now you'll be able to see the message, that's the message content. And usually if they signed it, you'll also be told, hey, this was signed by so-and-so. There's some additional parts of the practical exercise, which is basically, you can send it to the public key server. I have a special key server for the practical exercise. Let me get to that. This is one I set up. This one doesn't sync with the others. And the benefit of this is as you're learning, as you're playing with something new, and you don't want to upload a key to a public key server because you will never be able to tear that thing down, and it's being shared between all the servers, you can use this key server as your key server. I've disabled the syncing so you can play. You can make mistakes here, and you're not going to have to live with the fact that you made a mistake, and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your time on the internet. While email is usually the classical use model. It doesn't have to be email. You could use some other thing. As long as you get your text to the other person, it doesn't really matter how you got it there. But Some of us who might be challenged in finding someone else to send a message to and get a message from, there's this Adele, which is the GNU PP. It's a German website, but basically you can send an email to them, to this email address, and they'll send you an encrypted email back with your public key. And unless you have a bunch of friends who are interested in playing with crypto, this is automated. If you drop the -en, you'll get it in German. So just warning on that. Unless you know German, hey, who knows? I have 5 Keybase IO invitations available. So to encourage you to work through the practical exercise, if you can send me a message, encrypted, then what I'll do is I'll send you a Keybase IO invitation so you can play with that. I'm doing this basically to encourage you to use it. And we're getting, we're going to move. I moved a lot faster than I expected. If you're, this was introductory, is expected to just give you what you need to get off the ground and actually start using it. There's obviously the home page. It's kind of fun. If you go to pgp.mit.edu, they have a little search part in the web interface where you can type in people's email addresses or maybe their names, and it'll be kind of interesting what you can see on a public key server. It can be very entertaining, but that's worth taking a look at. A really good accessible book that explains a lot of this is it's a no-starch book, the PGP and GPG email for the practical paranoid. Really good book. And then if you felt that somehow I cheated you out of the math because I purposely stayed away from complicated math, but you really want to dig into cryptography, I suggest Applied Cryptography. It's a big book. It's really good. It's basically considered, I think, one of the most authoritative books on cryptography currently published. And that's actually the end of my prepared part of the presentation. I realize I went fast. So if there's any questions on anything we covered, please raise your hand. I'll try my best to explain. Yeah, go ahead. Why I can't hear that? Subkey. Okay. What happens? You have your signing key, and then you have different subkey. One of the subkey, I think your initial one is your encryption key. So the primary key, will actually be the one you sign things with, but you have a key that actually does your encryption and decryption. You can add additional keys. You could actually add additional subkeys. Say you decide you want to use some the new algorithm, you want to try elliptical curves when that comes out. You can add additional subkeys. Good question. You had a question, sir? Okay, good point. Your GPG, usually in a Linux environment, there'll be a .gpg folder in your home directory, and there'll be some files. As a general rule, the files are are binary. So now the thing is, you can use GPG command line tools and find your own fingerprint. You can run a command. In fact, it's in the practical exercise up earlier here, where you can basically GPG fingerprint, then your key ID, or you can even put in your identifier, and then you'll get your fingerprint. Yeah. Now there are ways to export your keys, to another file. Because that is a concern. I mean, how many of us have gone more than 5 years without having to reinstall our operating system? I can't seem to go like a year, right? I just, I do stuff and I find myself painted in a corner and then I have to export. So I do, actually, that is an important part. Thank you for kind of bringing to that, is that you want to be able to export it, because there will be times when you lose stuff. So backing it up so that when that day happens, whether you plan on it or it kind of happens, that you've got the ability to continue using. Yeah, good point. Other questions? Yep. Yes. I've used it. I'm not mostly a Windows person, but because I was going to do this presentation, I had a computer I put Windows on. GPG for Win is probably, to my knowledge, it's the only one, but I've actually used it and it's pretty usable. Well, it's a GUI, but you can have the command line too. Good question. Yes. Yes. I actually, thank you. That leads to an interesting place, and I will bring up here. Let's see here. There is a video that, let's see here, to do videos. And I won't show it here, but you can find it on on the web. But it is, let's see, crypto activism and GPG for journalists. What this was is in December of 2012, Snowden's trying to reach out to Glenn Greenwald. Glenn Greenwald at this time, no encryption, none of that, right? So he made this video called GPG for journalists. And basically, it's like a little walkthrough of installing GPG for Win and everything associated with that. So, and it goes through, he talks about everything, but I really recommend that if you're targeting a Windows user, because probably most people are running Windows, right? This video, I'd go find this video. I'd watch it, and I think it's actually really good. And it's kind of funny in the historical context, right? Because, I mean, how many times do you have something where someone was trying to do this and you actually have video? That's kind of fun. So, yes, does that answer your question? Yeah, go ahead. Yes. Well, the thing is, if you've lost your public key or private key, good question, thank you. The problem is you can't revoke it because you need your private key to do the revoking. That's why in the practical exercise, that's like the first step after generating your key, is generate your revocation, keeping it to the side, because now you can turn around and you'll put that on a public key server and now people know you revoked it. So yes. And then you're having to basically generate another key pair, and it's a big hassle. Just please don't lose control. But yes. What I've done personally is I have a little flash media drive. I got my revocation certificate. I have a safe at my mom's house, right? I'm the only one that has the combo to my safe. So I did my revocation key and put it in a safe at my mom's house. Yeah. Go ahead. Hey. Yeah. Once you got that, you're right. Once you got that, you don't need your private key because you've got the revocation certificate. You can use it. Yeah. Yeah, if you already got the revocation certificate. And that's why it's step 2 in the practical exercise, is so that you have that. There's no better time to get it generated than right after you generate your keys. Yeah, good point. Other questions? Yes. The thing is, I mean, I've seen a lot of people's stuff that have no expiration. Let me see if I can pull up mine here on this machine. This is my work machine. Sorry, work, but yeah. Let's do. I'm using GPG. Where are we at? Keybase. It's in here. Yeah, GPG, let's see. Yeah, let me just do that. GPG keychain. There we go. Okay. So what happens is a lot of times, like when you generate a key, and some of the software, it's basically a software default type scenario where they will say 4 years or 5 years. The reality is whatever you want. I think there'd probably be some concerns because, I mean, with advances in computing, keys that are strong today might not be strong in the future, right? So, I could see that as an argument for saying saying an expiration date for your keys, because you figure by 4 years down the road, the computing power might make this so that it's not strong anymore. I wouldn't want to use it past this date. But there's no real hard and fast rule. Yes? Yeah.
So, with the expiration date, that actually show on the servers that your ticket has expired, and so then you don't know?
Yeah, actually, usually, like, let me bring up, let's get to that point. Good point here. Let's go like pgp.mit.edu. So say we'll use mine. Don't send your spam here. So what happens is, like, here's my public key I've uploaded, and I've actually, like, I put an expiration, my software pretty much did it when I generated on here, and where you'll have an expiration date of 2018. I know some people who don't know expiration date, but there would be a point that if you're looking at someone's key and it's expired, that is a question. You may not want to trust that key, right? Because it has an expiration date. That's a good point. Yeah. Other question? Yes.
Yeah, my other question was, if you have so that there is
I was in the Army, so I used it. And for those of you who aren't familiar, also I can bring everyone else in on this. I think it was 2003, 2004, the Department of Defense started issuing new ID cards called the CAC. I can't even remember what it stands for, but basically, yeah, Common Access Card. There you go. But basically, it had like a smart card embedded in it, and you could use it to log into your machine, and you could also use it to encrypt and sign. I don't know. I mean, obviously, the systems are really, really close. The functionality, as far as I'm concerned, is basically equivalent, right? I don't know if it's exact implementation of each other, but I mean, basically, if you're good at GPG, using GPG, using the Army one will feel natural to you, because it's very, it feels like the same thing. Yeah. Do I know if it's the exact, like, different implementation of the same thing? Not sure exactly if they're compatible, if that's your question. Other questions? Cool. Awesome. Well, I hope, my goal here is that I hope you can get off the ground. I hope, if you've been just didn't understand something, and that's that one thing you didn't understand that got in your way of being able to use GPG, PGP, I hope I've answered those questions. If I haven't, find me, drag me to the side, ask your questions. I'm more than happy to sit and work through this with you. What I would recommend in the presentation here, let's go back to that, is use the training key server and the Adele. in play. Maybe fire up a VM, play with GPG, generate a key, knowing that you don't plan on really using this in the long run. You're just using it to try to learn, to get familiar and comfortable with it. And then, then once you feel like you've kind of got it down and comfortable, you can actually go, production. But my purpose in this and this is allowing you to play and learn in a kind of a sandbox. I'm going to disable this key server in like 2 months, so you don't have to worry about your key being on the internet forever. So, but other than that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming and listening, and especially for the questions. I cover things I want, but I realize that there'll be questions I really can't always anticipate. So, thank you.